Welcome back to the MetaMinds podcast, where we're all about relentless self-development. And today, Aimon and I will be talking about Imposter Syndrome. Now, what is that, Google? Imposter Syndrome can be defined as a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist despite evident success. Now, imposters suffer from chronic self-doubt and a sense of intellectual fraudulence that override any feelings of success or external proof of their competence.
I suppose it's important to kind of just frame what the actual Google definition is for those watching this in case they didn't actually recognize that they had some of this. But yeah, it was a term that kind of became apparent in my life maybe 2 or 3 years ago kind of thing. And it's very interesting. I suppose what we're going to do in this episode is just go through some of our experiences and maybe some moments where we felt that, some of the things that actually impact that, and how we actually got through that to climb the hill,
Yes.
and kill the dragon.
Yeah.
So here's me coming out. I'm actually a dragon slayer. So no. So yeah, and it's very crazy because it's like, the social media generation. It's so easy to have imposter syndrome. I suppose we'll kick it off there because it's like all you do is go on Instagram for 30 seconds, and all of a sudden you have seen 15 people that are trying to do the same thing as you, and also you get bombarded with ads by people trying to do the same thing as you, but are shaping your perception to make it look like they've actually already succeeded in that thing, which is what everyone's trying to do. Fake it till you make it. You can't blame them, you know.
That's it. Yeah.
Maybe some of them have made it. The fact remains that they are living an entirely different life to you, and you can't really compare themselves to you. So this is the comparison trap. And we've been over this.
We have, yeah.
But social media is the easiest thing to trigger imposter syndrome because you're trying to do something. Say it's run a video production business, which is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Very specific example, I know.
Yeah. Or even our podcast.
Our podcast, exactly. It's like, we've had periods of time where it's like, are we really the type of people to do that thing?
Yeah.
And then here we are, we kind of question our sense of self because of what we have identified with, and it's like, I guess we are the type of people to do that thing. But then what is the type of person? What characteristics do they have? And what kind of disciplines do they have? Like, it can be broken down into these little things. And they're based on stereotypes and social conventions, right? Definitely. So they're kind of unstoppable and they're just made up. And they're framed in our mind by outside. And we go, oh, do we fit into that mold? Because we want to fit into that mold because that's what the ego needs to do to feel comfortable.
That's exactly right.
So
there you
that's
go.
The episode over. Thanks for watching, folks.
Thank you so much. So no, that's exactly right, man. And like social media, like you said, massive trigger point. For me, I was experiencing imposter syndrome through actually like my undergraduate of psychology, but I didn't even really know what that concept was until someone like explained it to me. And I'm like, yes, I definitely have that. Like I feel this inadequacy. I feel like I'm not as competent as other people who are in the same space as me. And then it's like, now it's got a name, I can disarm it a bit more. I feel like now that I know that those feelings are coming up from like my ego potentially trying to protect me, or from my body trying to keep that equilibrium and go like, no, whatever, that kind of like came in pretty early. But then recently for me as well, like doing my counseling degree 3 years ago, started out feeling like, felt like, I've got a bit of knowledge from my psychology. And then when I went into the clinic and started working with clients, even though I've worked with clients before in the field, I felt like completely inadequate. I felt like I didn't belong. I just felt completely like lost for a few weeks there. And that was like clear imposter syndrome. Like I just didn't feel good enough. And I reflected on that and I spoke to my team about that. And me actually putting it out into the world disarmed it a little bit. Even though the feelings were still there, it made me feel like I had a little bit more control over a situation that is uncomfortable for me. So that was interesting to kind of overcome that. And still to this day, like I feel that about my ability to counsel, but I think that's, the same with anything until you like get enough experience to go like, I'm good at that thing. I'm decent. Like, let's keep going.
That's exactly literally it. And as you said, like your ego tries to defend you and then it's like, oh, maybe stay away from doing that. Because in this day and age, it's like, then you'll fight off the social judgment, which is just completely made up in your mind. You're like, oh, what will Cynthia say? I love using Cynthia as just a character in our podcast.
It's a good name.
What will Cynthia say? But it's like, actually, you don't even interact with Cynthia that much, so her opinion doesn't even matter of you, and she most likely hasn't even seen that you've released a podcast, so you've just made up thoughts about what she might think about you, and none of this matters at all. But it's your ego just being like, hey, maybe maybe don't do that, or do that in a particular way, present yourself in a way, because of then the social pressure will make you, the judgment, and you want to fit in. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
So it's like, to reel that back a little bit, it's like, it's your ego trying to protect you, which is awesome, and thank you. But in reality, if you listen to that all the time, you just have to take a step back and like observe that thing. Because if you listen to that all the time, you're never going to do anything.
Well, that's it.
And this is like, to build on the point you just mentioned, is like, you know, once you actually start doing the thing, you become the person that is the type of person to do that thing.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
You know, so you just have to get into a habit of doing whatever that thing is and just stay solid and push all potential external things outside of you. And if you really observe them, this is the case for myself. And I had a conversation with my friend about this recently.
Beautiful.
That's fine. It probably won't even be in the frame. So for those listening, something popped up on the computer for the first time on the podcast.
Yeah, first time. Imposter syndrome?
Anyway, so I had this conversation with my friend the other day, and she said that she doesn't really feel this way. But in my instance, it's like a lot of what I'm fighting off is fake judgments that my mind has made up, you know? So, and some of them could actually be valid as well. It's like you might have parents that aren't very supportive of you. I'm very lucky to have parents that are very supportive of me.
Yeah. Or a co-host that's not very supportive of you.
Yeah, you know, you might have that. Like, and you know, I'm very familiar with that. So, guys, if you're watching this, the little points to camera are really funny. So please jump on the YouTube channel, check it out, because there's more laughs here, honestly. Come join us. So, very long story short.
Yes.
A lot of this stuff is just like your mind just makes stuff up to stop you from doing things. And it's valid because it's trying to help you in the long run. But if you can see it before it takes over, you can actually push through it and go, no, I am going to do that thing because the judgment's not real. And even if it is real, it doesn't matter. And, you know, imposter syndrome.
Exactly right. And like the biggest thing as well is like all the people who have created something successful, right? Like all the athletes out there, or business men and women, or anyone who's tried to do anything, go and study, go to travel, like everyone has an opinion, right? And everyone will give you their opinion. And that's where that imposter syndrome can sneak in, where it's kind of like, oh, are you sure you want to do that thing? Or, oh, why are you still doing that? Or like all of these like comments that people can make, or like you said, these perceived things that you have, like these enemies, I guess, in your mind, or these like fear points in your mind. The reality is like, it comes back to the whole observing your thoughts, because they're still going to be there. Like people are still going to make comments regardless of how much you know success you make or where you get in your life. People will always have an opinion, but the imposter syndrome is like an internal battle, right? It's you versus the imposter syndrome. So at the end of the day, like their opinions don't like this. The whole idea of like hold it lightly. Hold everything lightly, right? Like constantly challenge, constantly question, but hold like other people's opinions lightly. And like you said before, people can kind of have, and you and I experience this, where you think that someone may say something, or you have this like perception in your mind that someone could think this way because I'm trying to be this person, right? But again, like, is that helpful? Are those thoughts actually productive or helpful for you? And also, does it matter what they think? Like you said before, if it's your really good friend and they feel that way, maybe it will hold a bit more weight. But if it's someone on the street, or if it's someone from high school that you don't care about, then it doesn't matter.
Which often it is.
It doesn't matter. Like, why does their opinion matter? It really doesn't.
You know, like this is, very interesting for us, because we've had several different, not different personal brands. We've had a personal brand each, and now we have this shared personal brand. And it has evolved and morphed over so much time. Like, as you mentioned, like your original YouTube channel was like a gaming channel or something. And then like, you know, that would have been hard because you're in high school, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're going to be like, well, what does Bill say of like, what's the opposite of Cynthia? I don't know. I suppose let's just go with Bill for now. We'll come up with a cooler character name later. But Bill, man, he's an asshole, dude. He's always judging you, dude.
I know, dude.
But then how does that make you feel internally? You know, but then all of a sudden your gaming channel turns into a tech review channel. But then like you have to go through different, like, you know, you're changing who you are to be that particular thing. So you're morphing from this person to this person. And then the thoughts that's coming from external are looking at you, and then they're looking at you in a different light. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling right now, but it's all kind of valid in what we're
for sure, talking
about. Like your brain stops you from doing things by how other people perceive you. You know?
And like imposter syndrome, for me, when I reflect back, as I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, that it was something I didn't really understand. Like I never knew what it was. I knew I experienced these things, but I didn't have a name for it, right? But now I see imposter syndrome sneaking in here and there, and being aware of it, I kind of visualize it as like a villain in my mind. Like it's something that's trying to sneak in. It's kind of like the ego, right? The ego can be a positive. It can also be a negative. So it's like sometimes it will sneak into that negative space. And like we said, imposter syndrome is there to help us survive, right? It's to help us like keep us in that place or whatever. But like, even we spoke about the podcast, like we have those moments where we have imposter syndrome with the podcast, and like we power through it and we communicate about it, and that's amazing. But imagine where we'd be if it was just me hosting this podcast and I'm talking to you. Yeah, like the fact that we have someone to make each other accountable, I think that makes our voice stronger against the imposter's voice.
So there you go. That's a huge, like, this is totally spot on, man. This is huge for people that are listening and potentially going through it. Is get someone together. You know, you don't have to be doing the actual same thing. Like, we are Metaminds Media doing this thing, right? But it could be like, for me, like, for example, I've gone through imposter syndrome with running a business in the filmmaking space, running a video production business for other businesses, you know? And so I've got a couple of friends around me, including yourself, that use video in many various ways, including a community online, which is another huge thing that's really helped me push through it, to not only see that it is possible, see that, that you can actually do these things and the type of person you want to be is valid and is supported kind of thing. Because, going through a business like with myself kind of thing, it's like, you're just constantly battling, you know, your ego. It's like, don't do that, dude. You know, everyone's going to be like, what are you doing with your life? I can't believe you're trying. You know, I make music as well, and it's the same thing. It's like, you'll never make money out of that. The amount of people that say that, and it's like, thank you for so much for that.
Thanks for the support.
Something that I really enjoy. That, anyway, we're bitching now.
Yeah, basically.
Welcome to the Girls Podcast. No, that's getting real off track in this one. We've had a rough day, guys. It's been up and down. But I don't know.
And that's why it's so relevant to talk about it now, because it's so raw almost, you know?
Yeah. So to finish that point is like the biggest thing I've gone through is the business thing, running a business, and who am I, the type of person to run a business? And then like, but you know, and then I have to like up my rates slowly. And so maybe, you know, back 10 years ago, I was like charging $100 for a video. And I'm like, whoa, I'm so rich, you know? But now I understand the true value of it, and I'm like, you know, selling video for $5,000 or $10,000, whatever it is, you know. But when I was originally moving up to those bigger rates, it's like, who am I, the kind of person to charge that amount of money? Like, my product is worth that amount of money, and it's like, you just have to realize that it actually is, and you are the decider of that thing.
Definitely.
And there's an imposter syndrome there, because when you throw out a price at a meeting, and you're like, fuck, is it this? I don't know, you know. And then all of a sudden, people are like, you know, but if you don't say it with confidence, because you have imposter syndrome, people aren't going to believe you because you're not actually that person. You're just pretending to be that person, and they're going to beat you down. So, but bring it back to your point. Is that we've done this thing together, and it's the same if I had a podcast, you know, and if I didn't have an online community with me in my video space, like, and if I didn't have supportive people around me reinforcing the self-belief that I want the outcome for, then there's no way that I would be in the spot that I'm in.
Definitely. And to add to that point as well, the biggest value I think I've gained from like trying to combat the imposter syndrome is actually like setting my intentions, whether that's like on my own with you for our business, for example, or whether it's for me with my little projects. I will communicate to friends that I trust, and also people who I know will give me an opinion or will throw back different comments. And I offer those suggestions to people so that kind of like whole package that I've got in my mind, like, I've got a podcast with my friend, we're going to transition into a media company, like those thoughts, if I communicate that to close friends of mine, it's like reinforcing it, and it's creating like an army against the imposter syndrome, right? And like for me, that's been the most powerful thing, because if I am feeling that way, I've got a few friends, and I've told you this, like if I ever stop making YouTube videos, or if I stop, you know, like doing the podcast or having that kind of passion, like I'd really appreciate it if you could like call me out on that, because that's something I really do appreciate and love, and it's like something that I value more than a lot of things in my life. Like it actually makes me feel like I'm fulfilled creating something and connecting with people online or through, you know, this form, hopefully people personally as well. So like that's massive for me. And like sometimes you forget that, because the imposter syndrome will come in, life events will come in, someone will throw you a curveball, you'll have some crap that you have to go through in relationships or friendships or your work, and it's easy to then curve off and go, actually, let's just play COD for 4 hours.
Which we did today.
But
as I said, it's been up and down. Don't judge us, okay? We're trying as hard as we can. We weren't originally even going to shoot this podcast.
Well, there you go.
We're crushing that content.
We crushed the imposter syndrome right there.
That's it.
But yeah, so that's massive to me, and that's something I think we're kind of adding on, like, surround yourself with people, again, we've spoken about in other podcasts, but surround yourself with people who will challenge you but support you, you know? 50% support, 50% challenge, wherever we got that quote from.
No idea. So, so yeah, and the other thing is it definitely ties into self-belief. And then, like, as you said, challenging. anyway, we've kind of covered like a lot of it, but the main thing is like, everyone goes through this. Everyone goes through self-doubt. It's natural and it's there for a reason. And it's awesome because sometimes you're going to jump off a cliff and your self-doubt's like, maybe you shouldn't do that, bro.
Yeah.
And then it saves your life and all of a sudden you go on to do great things. So it's like, hey, ego, thank you for trying to save my life. Just so happens that it puts a bigger impact on social things now because it's a bigger threat to us now, the social dynamic with the social media world. You have to have likes and validation, and this is what all this stuff is amplified because of the current world we live in, as opposed to a lion eating us.
Yeah.
We don't really have that threat anymore. Like, I do see a lot of lions around the suburb. It's quite scary. But I just hit them with my car. It's all good. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. There you
Joking.
go.
We're vegan here on the Meta Minds Media Podcast. We don't do that. But yeah, so it's like it's a bigger social threat is the it's a bigger threat
is a social threat now
is social. So
we don't have predators,
which is why your ego more strongly identifies with trying to save you from doing things socially, such as putting yourself out there.
Yeah, definitely.
This is the thing. Like sometimes I'll like write out a post on Instagram. I'm like pouring my heart out and saying something really meaningful to me, and then I'm like, who's even going to read this? And like, is this even going to affect anyone? Is it just going to come off like everyone's like, oh my god, he's such a like. That's the other thing is like, you want to be understood. You want to make sure that you're actually communicating the right thing. And so if you're having self-doubts about if you're communicating it in the actual correct way, then all of a sudden, because things can be perceived in millions of different ways. Like a post on social media, I love everyone. And then someone could be like, you hippie, but it's actually me saying something else. You know what I mean? Just things can be perceived differently, especially on social media again. And we have a need to be understood. Like there's a basic human instinct, So yeah, this is another form of imposter syndrome, really. It comes in many different forms and it's slippery.
It is very, very slippery. So I guess for people out there who have recognized maybe now that either we've like pulled the veil off for them and they've recognized like, oh, maybe I am experiencing imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So firstly, before we get onto that, so we're going to jump into like the mindset of potentially how you can actually reframe these thoughts in your mind and how you can actually change this, which is where Dan comes in because he's an expert on this, guys. Yeah. But firstly, we want to hear like, if you're listening to this and it's triggering something, you either haven't heard of it before, or you have and you can recognize it. Please let us know in the comments or on Instagram. Yep. We always dare you to send us a video message of what your imposter syndrome is. We want to hear from you guys.
Definitely.
Put it in the comments, like what imposter syndrome are you going through or have you gone through? Have you had an experience with it? Let us know.
Definitely.
Hit us with a solution, Dan.
Okay, well, it's maybe not a full solution, as nothing is, but it's an idea, it's an option for you to maybe reframe your mind. So it's a counseling technique that I've been learning through my master's. And it's through a narrative approach, and it's basically called externalizing. So as you might have noticed throughout the podcast, I was referring to the imposter syndrome, right? So it's giving it like you're personifying it, like you're saying, this is a thing, this isn't you. Like you, Aimon, aren't imposter syndrome, your entire identity isn't. It's just an element that's impacting on your life. Same with like self-doubt, same with fear. They're all things, and anxiety, for example, like those things can creep in, but for a lot of people, that's not your state always, that's not your like penultimate total state at all points in your life. So it creeps in, right? So the idea is that you create like an object or a name out of it. So we'll call it Bill. And that's the imposter syndrome. And then when you try to break it down, you try to recognize what allies does Bill have? Or the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So fear could be one, anxiety could be one, like self-doubt as well. Like all of these things, they could be allies to the imposter syndrome to try to pull you down, right? To try to like really tear apart at you and your sense of self. So that's like one thing, to recognize that and to question like what place they actually play in your life, how regularly you see them. Like, are they there always? Is fear always accompanied by imposter syndrome, the imposter syndrome, Bill? Is Bill always there with Cynthia, basically? Or not, and if you start recognizing that, you take some power away from that. So say, for example, today, if we break it down, we may have had the imposter syndrome a couple of times through the day, but it wasn't the entire day. So we've already taken a bit of power away from it, recognizing it. And then we start to recognize what counters we have to the imposter syndrome. So, for Bill, for example, I don't know, maybe he doesn't like optimism. Bill doesn't like optimism. And if I'm optimistic, today's going to be a good day. Aimon's going to come over.
Connections. To build on what we're talking about before. It's like a friend that's supportive and be like, no, you can do that thing. Yeah. Bill hates that friend.
Yeah, and Bill hates that friend, exactly. But it takes some power away from Bill. And that's basically it. Like you reframe it in this way that it's like a narrative approach. It's relatable to you, so you can name it certain names if you've got someone you dislike maybe, or if you've got an object that creates like a negative image in your mind, like name that the negative image so it's got less power, categorize it in this box so that you can take some power away from it and go, I don't actually want the imposter syndrome to affect me today. I'm going to kill it today. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to be my 100%. And whatever happens outside of that, that's fine. That's life. And that can, over time, obviously it's a reframing. It takes time, but it can be really powerful to recognize exactly what it's trying to do and what counters you have to it.
Yeah, for sure. And, maybe don't name it Bill. Like maybe name it something that
name it something
really
else.
stick for you.
Like some clients will call it like a shape, for example. They may just call it like a circle or whatever. Or you could call it something like the devil, or you could call it something like trying to think of something. Yeah, the brain, whatever, anything. Yeah. So that can be powerful.
Yeah, and I had a point and now it's gone. Isn't that funny? It happens almost every episode, basically. But no, you're spot on with that kind of thing. But this is it. It's like basically it all comes back to awareness every time. Mm-hmm. It's just like, because if you can't recognize it and then all of a sudden you're not doing something because you're afraid of something and there's a block there's like a little black gap that you can't jump over, a hurdle, but you don't know what it is, and then you just don't take the action to get the outcome that's going to be most positive for you. Then you kind of recognize that the imposter syndrome is kind of stopping you from doing that because you're not sure about who it is, the type of person. So to bring it right back to its roots and the foundation, it's like, it's about who you are and who you believe you are. Mm-hmm. But the funniest thing about this is that who you are now is different to who you are tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And who you believe you are is entirely malleable based on your current state. Right? So it's like, I'm super emotional right now. It's like, I'm an emotional guy and I'm real sad and I'm this. And then all of a sudden something happens and then, I'm really happy again. I had a great sleep and I had a good workout and I'm feeling good right now. And so your state is totally different. You're an entirely different person in those two states, Mm-hmm. And so, basically it's like, I'm not sure if I'm the type of person to do that thing. And so, for example, putting yourself out there on social media, which is like basically the hugest thing, because as I said, it's like, I'm also a musician, right? So I make bass music, and that's kind of like a cool DJ kind of thing to do, right? And so all of a sudden I have these two identities, right? And I'm also a guy that has like a self-development podcast that's like helps people and and so it's like those two things don't really go together. So if I'm talking to my DJ friends or whatever, and I know that some of them know that I do a podcast, it's like, what do they think about the type of person that I am that does that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. But then similarly, I'm trying to run a video business and be a professional and blah, blah, blah. And I shave my face. And then what do they think about me making dubstep? These are two identities and they clash. And this is an important part of that as well.
Definitely.
Because it's like, how do you present yourself on social media if you are the type of person to do this and this? And it's like, but then also in 10 years, you're going to be an entirely different person. Mm. And then the thought into your head is like, but what happens if I look back on that content and I go, that's weird. And what am I, But it's like, that's who you are in this moment.
Well, that's it.
And if you're presenting your authentic self as best you can to the world, then nobody can fault you. Because it's like, I can't believe you do that thing. And it's like, I can't believe I did something in alignment with my values in this present moment. Who's really laughing?
Well, that's it.
I'm exactly fulfilled right now trying to help people.
Yeah.
And you're the person that's judging people generally because, and that's, again, this is a made up character that I'm just saying.
Yeah. But it's a very common character.
Yeah.
And there are people out there who just
And
judge.
there are people that actually judge. Because they're afraid of taking the action or whatever the reason is.
And again, that's ego. That's trying to pull people down to their level to make them feel better.
Yeah.
But anyway, and what I got from that is the idea that we can also wear different hats, right? So you create bass music and you've got this DJ kind of persona, which isn't really that different from everything else. You're still an authentic human being, you're still passionate, you're still extremely driven. It's just a separate passion outside of the podcast and
you want
the video.
people to perceive you differently
for sure
under that, with that hat.
Yeah, which again kind of goes into the idea that we kind of do have a fluid personality, right? Or we have the opportunity to, and I'm sure people recognize this out there.
I have a fluid gender as well.
There you go.
No, we shouldn't joke about that.
But you and I have a different connection with you than I do with a group of people. Or when I'm in my counseling space, I have a different way of being and holding space. But it's also I still have core things that I believe and core kind of traits or ways to be. So it's kind of that's okay as well to recognize that you can wear different hats. You can be a mum. You can also be a fitness instructor, and they have different looks. You know, you don't have to align 100% in every single category and go, I'm this person all the time.
Yeah.
It's realistic, I think, to see that things can change and you can have different kind of ways to be.
And to bring it back to the point you made at the start there is don't hold anything too tightly. Because if you're the type of mum that drops your kids off at school every day, and you're the type of personal trainer that only trains females or something, And the point's gone again. Oh dear, one of those days.
One of those days.
Yeah, no, it's actually gone this time.
Oh no, there you go.
Well, oh no, yeah, just don't hold anything so tightly because it's but I can't do that because that doesn't align with this part of my personality. And it's like, they're different people. Again, you know, you're doing this in this moment and that's your persona here. And yeah, it's like maybe you're not going to be doing those things in this environment, but that doesn't mean you're not these two people. You just do this thing in this moment and then you do this thing in this moment. And if you apply judgment to it, then all of a sudden you're putting it in a box, which puts limitations on it. It's so funny.
Definitely,
because like we have moments of like just blah, right? But then we have moments of like, whoa, that was pretty good there, you know?
Yeah, dude, I love it.
So anyway.
It's great. But it really is just us like experiencing consciousness and just expressing something. Like we never plan for this. Like we spoke briefly and I love that about it because things do come out authentically and genuinely and we just kind of express like we've experienced this. Everyone's experienced this. But it's not to the point that we're like drilling down so deep and we're like, this is what you have to do. Like I think this episode we've given lots of options. And I guess like to round it out. So like if people have recognized imposter syndrome, like what kind of things do we have strategies or anything? I haven't even thought about this yet.
I think we have.
We covered most of it.
I think we've covered it. It's like what is it? And then and then like how to basically get around it is like just be observant of it.
Yeah, be observant.
Don't judge yourself.
Hold it.
That's the thing.
Loosely.
Yeah, hold it.
That was another really
That's the biggest thing I think. To simplify it, really, is like don't judge yourself because you know everyone's judging everything, and that's your brain's job to have thoughts about your environment to keep you safe, as we said. But it's like if you apply judgment to yourself, then you're limiting yourself. So it's like, but then, I can't believe I did that thing. It's like, I did that thing. It was a mistake and it was funny. And now I can move forward and realize that that was a mistake, you know?
Yeah.
So, this is a pretty good podcast, man. Special shout out to our sponsors, us.
Oh, yeah.
We sponsor the podcast. It's MetaMinds Media. Let us know if you like the 2-camera setup. If you're just listening, check us out on YouTube because our quality is getting real nice. We like it. We've got these new t-shirts. Turn around, Dan. Hopefully you can see us.
Hopefully.
We're going to be doing a lot of spicy things in the new year. So if you have any thoughts for us, let us know. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. We have a special couple of holiday episodes coming up for you. So keep an eye out for that because we're going to be doing silly things that are also still packed with value. So thanks for listening to the MetaMinds podcast. We help conscious businesses change the world.
Thank you.